Right, in this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television, we come back to the Ministerial Council meeting which took place yesterday at the Unity Palace in the nation's capital, Yaoundé. With what impact? A guest will be telling us more on that in the second part of this newscast. Plus, more than 60% of school-going kids in Mokolo, that is pupils in Mokolo, Mayot-Sanaga division of the Far North region of Cameroun, are without birth certificates. How are they coping? We take you to that part of the country in this edition of the news. Also ahead, 2 years after the consortium was banned and its leaders are arrested in the 2 Anglophone regions of Cameroun, Barrister AGBORTEM speaks out. He's going to be telling us in this edition of the news how the deepening Anglophone crisis has continued to leave unhealed injuries. We shall be right back with the details. Stay with us. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you for joining us in this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television. Let's begin right away in the nation's capital, Yaoundé. The President of the Republic of Cameroun, who chaired a Council of Ministers meeting which lasted for barely 17 minutes. That was yesterday in the nation's capital. The council had only one point on the agenda, which pushed many to wonder on the impact of the set exercise. The previous Council of Ministers took place, that was in March 2018. Details with Mfomi Armstrong Sander.
16 minutes few seconds is the total time that Paul Biya and his ministers spent during the first ever Council of Ministers for 2019 and the first since the last partial cabinet shake-up. Normal according to some observers, considering the nature of the agenda, whose single point was the declaration of the President of the Republic. Same day, Wednesday, January 16, 2019, the Council of Ministers in Ivory Coast lasted hours. Logical though, according to some observers, considering the agenda which included government's declaration, general measures, individual measures and other matters. A Council of Ministers is generally defined as a regular meeting of government ministers, mostly on weekly basis, according to Wikipedia. The definition leaves much to ponder on if one has to compare it with the Cameroonian type of Council of Ministers. How frequent it should hold and the agenda outlined by the definition is not viable in Cameroon. In France, for example, a Council of Ministers is an occasion for the executive to discuss and adopt principal issues such as the laws in force and nominations. The period for this important meeting in Cameroon provokes a lot of curiosity. The last Council of Ministers in Cameroon dates far back as March 2018. Sometimes it takes years for a Council of Ministers to hold in Cameroon, depending on when the President deems necessary. With regards to content, the Council of Ministers in Cameroon usually has only the President's declaration on the agenda. The cases of Ivory Coast, Gabon or France are different as the President creates enough time to discuss with his ministers on key resolutions. Many are then concluding that Cameroon's kind of Council of Ministers is more of a sporadic formality than an exercise meant to boast, orient and implique government's actions.
And what is the role of the Ministerial Council and with what impact? We would be telling you more on that in the second part of this newscast. We now take you to the Far North region of Cameroun. As we announced in the headlines, taking part in an official examination is practically difficult for some kids in Mokolo, that is a locality in the Mayot-Sanaga division of the Far North region of Cameroun. As a result of lack of birth certificates, close to 60% of school-going pupils are not in possession of the said document. Education officials have so far indicated or attributed the situation to financial constraints. We share in the following report by Immaculate Fogwe that 44,000 kids are living without birth certificates. Her report.
More than half of students living in Mokolo, chief town of the Mayot-Sanaga, do not own a birth certificate. The statistics were revealed by Mr. Kambesi Maliki, the basic inspector of Mokolo, on indication that only 36,000 out of the existing 80,000 students have their birth certificate.
Nous avons plus de 200 écoles dans l'arrondissement
We have more than 200 schools in the locality, harboring 80,000 students, and up to 44 of them are without birth certificates. These statistics were gotten from different heads of academic institutions in locality. We hope that the government and persons of goodwill could come to our aid, so some of these kids could be able to sit in for official examinations. Madam Geleta Angeles, a teacher in the locality, says, poverty is a principal cause of the rising phenomenon.
Nous avons des problèmes d'actes de naissance avec nos enfants ici. Depuis des années.
We have a problem of children not being in possession of birth certificates for years. When we speak to their parents about the situation, they tell us that school is free and that birth certificates should equally be provided to them by the government. We have parents here who are very poor. So if the government can help us provide birth certificates to these kids, then it will be of great help. A victim of the situation, Mr. Bayowa Bava, says he has never owned a birth certificate until he started going to school. He hopes that the government could lessen their burden by providing the document. These inhabitants say obtaining a birth certificate is a fundamental right. So they are calling on the government to look into the situation and see how aid could be provided to them.
That is Immaculate Fogwe, the reporting. We're still with you, Immaculate, to talk about acquiring a national identity card in Cameroon, which is a veritable nightmare to users. Things have not been the same again for those applying for the document since the biometric system was introduced a few years back. Douala residents recounted their day-to-day difficulties to Immaculate Fogwe. Hippolyte Folefak has been struggling with a temporal national identity card for 2 years now. She's recounting how officials at a police station where the document is produced have had to stamp her receipts countless times just so she can go about her activities normally. But the question of how long this will last is a preoccupation of this Douala resident. It was since 2014 that I lost my identity card. It has not really been easy because I found myself going to the police station more than 6 times so my temporary identification card could be signed and dates pushed forward. It was later on that the inspector asked me to go to Yaoundé and check what was really wrong. While there, I was told that I was one of the first sets of persons to establish a computerized identity card. So, the information that was taken did not arrive in Yaoundé.
Les informations qu'on avait prises ne sont pas arrivées à Yaoundé, ce qui fait que beaucoup de personnes n'ont pas reçu leur carte d'identité.
Roland Joro is another victim. This member of the Cameroun bar who says he was tired of enduring the situation launched the hashtag, I quote, "I want my identification card," which went viral on social media. Reactions from other social media users was a clear indication that it is a general problem. He is accusing the heads of the police unit for failing to give the right information to the needy population. Sometimes obtaining your ID card when it is out is a very tedious process. You have to wait on the line for. We apologize for that technical fault. We certainly will be coming back to that report in our subsequent newscast. Now, road users in the economic capital Douala say that the iron protectors used along the stretch of road or the newly constructed stretch of road are of poor quality. They are now calling on the government of Cameroon to instruct the company that is in charge of the road network to get better irons, without which their lives would be in danger. Sumanji Kangebru has the details of that report.
Bonasama roundabouts in the Douala 4 subdivision. This is part of the road that has just been delivered to the government, though not officially inaugurated. Unfortunately, the iron bars placed as protection along the road have all collapsed. What makes the inhabitants to ask questions?
The construction is quite good, but the bars, the protection, the protectors, they are all down. I don't know what's actually going on. But when you look at it, you feel as if it is very, very solid. But when there's any eventuality, you see all the bars are down. I don't know whether they have actually handed the work to the government or they are still under construction.
From an aerial view, the Army Rescue Roundabout, still in Douala 4 Council area, though beautiful in the eyes, has the same problem, and inhabitants request that the government should go back to the drawing board and repair the iron bars along the road.
As he say, the fence may come in look where they go do again for the road. So that maybe the road will be fine road. Because as the iron day so, now so it cause accident every day.
At the Ndobo neighborhood, precisely at the railway roundabout, inhabitants are sending the same worry and suggesting that better irons should be installed along the roads for the benefit of the population.
No need to put that kind of iron there. The family find still iron. Put a road to that
Apart from the iron bars along the road that have collapsed, the flyover bridge at the old Texaco roundabout is also a major preoccupation to the road users. Even though the road has been officially delivered to the government, from every indications, if it will be inaugurated, more work needs to be done before that time.
Smanjikan Gabriel, the reporting now. Members of the National Trade Union of Transporters say that they are going to freeze their activities and down their tools come this 22nd of January 2018. They indicated that it would be inevitable if the government fails to negotiate and dialogue with them. They say that the sector is plagued with corruption. Innocent Aze has the details.
Nothing, they say, will prevent them from organizing a strike January 22nd, 2019 to echo in the eardrums of the government the need to urgently redress their plights. These members of the National Trade Union for Transporters clearly underlined that only government's readiness to dialogue and negotiate can instigate them reverse their decision.
We have been forced, all the stakeholders, all the trade unionists, to stop working on the 22nd of January. We call for government for dialogue. We call to government for inclusive dialogue. And we call for negotiation. If not, by the 22nd of January, we'll have to stop our activity and search into deep solution before we continue.
The disgruntled trade unionists have been converging in Douala, where they unveiled the series of worries eating deep their souls. Transportation issues which serve as obstacles in their activities, notably corruption. The trade unionists revealed that truck drivers had to budget at least 187,000 francs CFA daily to settle customs, gendarmes, police, and others before moving into Central Africa.
We are working now to stabilize transport prices. We are working now to stabilize the activity, and we want our productivity to be grown up. We talked about the money we are paying to enter Central African Republic. We pay for escort. That is not fair. It is not normal. That in our private activities, which is not well sustainable, we have to pay 50,000 francs at any trip to enter Central African Republic. And we are the one paying. The minister is there. The United Nations are there working for peace, but we are the ones suffering by paying again our money before entering the country.
Another preoccupying problem of the National Trade Union for Transporters is the sealing of its technical structure by the Supreme State Audit.
They came for audit, but unfortunately we realized that the structure is inside sealed. They are even the one working at our place today. And we want to remind all the nation, all stakeholders, that the BGFT is a private structure built and governed by the trade unions. And we don't understand, we cannot accept.
Their wish is to also see government unseal their technical structure, otherwise leaves them with no option than freezing their activities and striking peacefully next week, to be specific, January 22nd.
And the Cameroun Employers Organization, known in its French acronym as GICAM, an entreprise Cameroun that is ECAM are stepping up efforts to upgrade the strength of the private sector in view of contributing adequately in reviving and stabilizing the limping economy of Cameroon. Both employers' organizations signed and issued a joint declaration that was today in Douala, creating an organ of coordination. AGBORTEM President Celestin Tawamba signed for his organization and Prote Ayangma signed for ECAM, which he heads as president. The organ, created by both organizations and placed under the presidency of the president of AGBORTEM, would have to coordinate mutual actions geared towards enhancing the competitive and productive capacity of enterprises and the Cameroonian economy at large through a growing stronger public-private partnership. For greater details in the following excerpt, we are going to be having the reaction of the ECAM president, Prote Ayangma, who spoke to Babla Jonathan. That was today. Take a listen.
It is a necessity because the situation is not good, you know, as well as us. We need to reinforce our position. We need to together try to make mutual efforts to try to tackle this situation, because we cannot each one try to battle. So that we think that it was very, very necessary to try to put together our forces. That is why we decide now to make mutual efforts to try to tackle this situation. Tax, relation between government and private sector, relation between employers and employees, and all macroeconomic problems.
That is the president of ECAM, Prote Ayangma, there speaking to Babla Jonathan. Before we continue, it should be noted that in the nation's capital, Yaoundé, workers at the Pobia Stadium went on rampage. That was this afternoon. They were calling on the government of Cameroon to pay their months or several months of unpaid salaries. Now, it is €2 now, and it all seems like yesterday. January 17th, 2018 marked the end of the consortium, which was created to lead peace talks with the government of Cameroon and address the problems of the English-speaking population in the country. That same day, those who represented what was called the moderate voices were caught and locked up. Internet shut down in the two Anglophone regions of Cameroon, and the crisis became what is now called armed conflict. Events marking the day are still fresh on the minds of Agbor Bala, that is Barrister Agbor Bala, the president of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, was arrested that fateful day, the 17th of January 2017, alongside Dr. Fontem Neba and a host of others. Derek Jato tells us more in the following report.
We don't know the main reason why they are coming back, the security forces. Every vehicle is coming back. Right now, we don't know why that immediate turnaround. The security forces are coming back.
This is how Southern Cameroon woke up Tuesday, January 17, 2017. Some political observers even hold that the political sun took its rise that day from this small town called Equinoxe in Moyoka subdivision of the southwest region.
It has not been friendly here. We are heading towards the main Equinoxe town, and we are equally going to see what the security forces are doing. Everybody has gone into this home, and now you can see the roads all colonized by stones.
Others say it was a complete turning point, marking the end of the peaceful and consortium phase of the Anglophone crisis and the beginning of what is today known as an armed conflict. It was on this day 2 years ago that internet was shut down in the two Anglophone regions. The consortium banned, and the Anglophone leaders heading the consortium arrested. Barrister Agbor Bala Felix was at the forefront.
17 January 2017 was a day that I would never forget, you know.
A day, he said, change everything.
Then at about a few minutes after 5, I got a call from the publisher of the Guardian Post, Chris Senga, and was asking my opinion. A few minutes after, Mimi Mefu of Equinoxe also called me to let me have my opinion on the banning of the consortium. That was the last interview I granted. Someone from the U.S. Embassy called me to inform me that I'll be arrested and that the internet will be cut off. Radio France also called me for an interview, and I told them that I was in a small meeting. They should call me in 5 minutes. You know, whilst Fontem was coming in, the guys, the commissioner of police, I think Moriko and a couple of people came and told us that they had sent them to arrest us. And that was the worst part of the journey. We were caught from behind from Douala to Yaoundé. When we got to Yaoundé around almost midnight, we were blindfolded. I was sent to the principal prison in Koding.
He will be given back his freedom after 8 months. And today, Barrister Agbobala Felix gave reasons why he is going about his activities more this time as the child of the revolution.
The struggle definitely has to continue, but we can re-strategize in a way that it would not be costly in terms of human lives, in terms of property. My regular day, I would come to the office, the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa and the law firm. I would have a meeting with the staff members who are doing a wonderful job. I would probably, if I have a class to teach in the university, I would go there and teach. I have advocacy to do. At times people call you from jail, you would have to visit them, because I see myself as a child of the revolution, you know, and I always feel that I owe them a duty of care to always say thank you for the massive support.
He says he is restless.
You cannot sleep when you have about 600 and 700 of your people in jail. You cannot sleep when you have about 50,000 in refugees. You cannot sleep when you have about 600,000 people internally displaced. How can you sleep when you have about 160 villages burned? How can you sleep when kids don't go to school? So these are things that they are my preoccupation.
And there have been a lot of broken relationships. It is hope that this visually impaired man finally reunited with his only son Alain, that left for work and was reportedly missing that January 17, 2017 in Ekuna town.
Before we take you to the second part of this newscast, we should note that Bilongili Confiance Bonnet was appointed the Director of Cabinet at the Prime Minister's office to replace Paul Gugu Momingo. It is contained in a presidential decree that was made public this afternoon, and Mr. Walter Wanja was equally appointed Private Secretary to the Prime Minister, Head of Government. And that brings us to the end of this first segment of the news. We shall be right back with talking points. Stay with us. Good evening to you once again, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you for joining us in this second segment of the news. We have as guest an actor of the civil society, Mr. AGBORTEM Jean-Claude. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Mimi, and thanks for bringing me once more to your platform.
We should be thanking you for coming. The main management board of Cameroon actually met yesterday. When I talk about the main management board, I'm talking about the Ministerial Council meeting which took place yesterday, chaired by the President of the Republic. It was an opportunity for the head of state to prescribe the roadmap for the current government, which is being led by Minister Joseph John Guti as Prime Minister, Head of Government. When we talk about a Ministerial Council meeting, that is taking place for the second time after that which took place, the first time after that which took place in March 2018. To you, what is the significance of a ministerial meeting?
Well, Mimi, a ministerial council meeting is very, very important in a normal country, because that is exactly where the vision of the president is being discussed and strategies defined to move the country forward. Permit me to say this one yesterday was particular, because it is the first after Mr. Biya's re-election. It is the first after his cabinet reshufflement. It is also coming at a time when Cameroon was stripped of its AFCON hosting rights. and in particular at a time when the Anglophone crisis is at its peak. So as a normal Cameroonian, we had a lot of expectations because we thought that that was an opportunity for Mr. Biya, who is the president of Cameroon, to seek solutions first in consolidating the peace of the nation, because you cannot talk about developing a nation when there is no peace. And maybe you're going to come to that question to ask me if I was disappointed. Yes, I was.
Because you talk about consolidating the peace of the nation, but they talked about the need for the various ministers, the head of government and his ministers, to ensure that they upgrade the living standards of Cameroonians. The President of the Republic equally announced that the regional elections that were highly expected as per the 1996 law in Cameroon would finally take place. This, according to some observers, would speed up the process of decentralization and maybe better the living condition of Cameroonians. Is that not a good news? It is not a good news. First of all, we are just being too polite by saying there was a meeting. No, Mimi, there wasn't a meeting. We are in a dictatorial regime, and when you understand how dictators functions, you see it in yesterday's meeting. The meeting lasted for between 15 to 17 minutes. He came, read his instructions. That is not a meeting. I think instead of wasting people's time, bringing them on the table to read instructions, it is better you send them copies in their various ministerial offices. That's the first thing. Now, secondly, what do you expect people to treat in 15 minutes? Looking at the stake of the nation, how can we work for 15 minutes? It's impossible. Now, coming to your question, how can you see, I don't understand how you can be talking about enhancing the lives of people when many Cameroonians are refugees, internally and externally. You should first of all tackle that. And there is no how Mr. Biya can pretend to love Cameroon and doesn't give an open ear and direct concern to the Anglophone crisis. Yesterday was an opportunity with the new Prime Minister for firm instruction and directives on resolving the Anglophone crisis, but nothing was done. When you look at the final communique, it is shocking. And I ask myself, you see, when you look at the communique and you listen to the promises that were made some months ago before the presidential election, you ask yourself if it is the same President Paul Biya that chaired this meeting yesterday. A lot of incoherence. We need people to understand that this regime is out of place. And when a regime is out of place, there is no how. The regime was voted less than 3 months ago, and it is there for 7 years. They were voted, the President of the Republic was voted by Cameroonians. Mr. AGBORTEM Jean-Claude, let us come back to this Ministerial Council meeting, which is supposed to draw the roadmap of the cultural, economic, and social program of the government of Cameroon, as indicated by the President of the Republic. What I wish to find out, when you listen to the report on Femi Armstrong-Sandai, he indicated very clearly that the scenario is different in other countries, like Ivory Coast, where you see the President scold at some ministers who went wrong, indicate, even sanction some that were faulty in their executions or in the discharge of their various duties. But we see a different scenario in Cameroon. What is the impact of this, what one can term inefficiency of the Ministerial Council meeting in Cameroon? What could possibly be the impact? My dear Mimi, you are aware of how people celebrate ministerial appointment in Cameroon. Ministerial appointment in Cameroon is not for people to work, but it is somehow an opportunity for the president to say thank you for those who have been very firm behind him, for his faithfuls. Now, take the case of the present government. The reshufflement was an opportunity for Mr. Biya to thank those who worked for him for his re-election, in quotes. Now, coming to your question, in other countries, we have ministerial councils. This one would have been particular, first, in the fact that the ministerial reshufflement would have sanctioned some ministers, but on the contrary, they were shifted. It's just like somebody is not capable in the Ministry of Sports,
You take that person and put on the Ministry of Culture and mix up like that. So what do you expect? That's why I said yesterday's meeting was supposed to be particular, because it was like a transition between his past tenure, 7 years tenure, and the new one. It would have been an opportunity for stock taking. And if Mr. Biya took proper stock yesterday, he would have known that the approach of the regime in resolving the Anglophone crisis has been poor. And there is time, just like Barrister Bala said, there is time for new strategies so that we avoid massive loss of lives and property. That is what the Ministerial Council was supposed to do, instead of just coming out with a communique after 15 minutes. And as you heard, the Prime Minister coming out of that council could not even say something because there was no meeting. He said the president has instructed us.
But you know, those are in-house strategies that the government would obviously be undertaking, and you don't expect the minister or government to expose everything to the public.
We hope that we know that the fruits of the incapacity of this regime,
what we should be expecting is actions.
We are not expecting anything because they are worn out.
Thank you so much, Mr. AGBORTEM, for joining us tonight on Talking Point. We hope to have you some other time again. Thank you so much for your time. To our viewers, it was equally a pleasure having with us in this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe Television. Until we meet again, goodbye.